Have you ever thought about what your scent says about your survival? Not just whether you remember deodorant this morning, but what the actual chemistry of your skin is screaming about your internal state. We usually think of body odor as a hygiene thing. You sweat, you smell, you shower. End of story.
Right. It's seen as a social problem, not a medical data point.
Exactly. But for people living with adrenal insufficiency or AI, that scent can actually be a distress signal. It's a biological red flag that the body is operating on emergency power. Today, we are dissecting an article from the My Adrenal Life blog titled An Unspoken Symptom: Understanding Body Odor Changes in Adrenal Insufficiency. It dives into a symptom that patients talk about in forums, but rarely bring up in the doctor's office. The fact that when your cortisol is gone, you smell different, and it's not just in your head.
It's definitely not. And what's fascinating here is that this article really bridges the gap between patient experience, that I swear I smell weird feeling, and the hard endocrinology behind why. When we look at the science, body odor isn't just sweat. It's a cocktail. It's a chemical reaction between what your glands secrete and the bacteria living on your skin.
Okay, so let's break down that cocktail, because the article makes a bold claim right off the bat. This isn't a failure of hygiene. It's a failure of hormones, specifically cortisol.
That's the core of it. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, but I like to think of it more as the maintenance hormone. It regulates blood sugar, inflammation, and metabolism. In adrenal insufficiency, whether it's Addison's disease or secondary AI, that cortisol is missing. So the body has to pivot to Plan B to survive. And Plan B is messy.
And Plan B involves a different cast of characters, right? The article mentions adrenaline taking over. How does swapping cortisol for adrenaline change how you smell?
So, we have two main types of sweat glands. You have apocrine glands, which cover most of your body and secrete mostly water and salt to cool you down. That stuff is generally odorless until it sits for a long time. But then you have apocrine glands. These are in the armpits and groin, and they don't produce water. They produce a thick, milky fluid packed with proteins and lipids.
Proteins and lipids. That sounds like food.
To bacteria, it is a 5-course meal. Now, apocrine glands are triggered by emotional stress and adrenaline, not just heat. In a healthy person, cortisol helps regulate that stress response. But in someone with AI, without cortisol to pump the brakes, the body relies heavily on catecholamines, like adrenaline, to keep blood pressure up. It's essentially in a chronic fight or flight mode. This triggers those apocrine glands to work overtime.
So you're flooding the skin bacteria with this high-protein, high-fat sweat because your body is running on pure adrenaline.
Precisely. And when bacteria break down those specific proteins and fats, the byproduct is pungent. It's sharper. Patients often describe it as sour, acrid, or just chemically stronger than a normal gym sweat. It's the scent of biological stress.
That distinction, sharp or sour, is really interesting because the article contrasts it with another scent profile caused by metabolism. It talks about a sweet or acetone-like smell. That seems like the opposite of sour.
It is, and it points to a totally different mechanism failure. Remember, cortisol's job is to maintain blood sugar. When you don't have enough cortisol, you are prone to hypoglycemia, or low blood sugar. When the body can't find glucose for energy, it starts burning fat rapidly as an emergency fuel source.
Ketosis, like the diet everyone is obsessed with.
Exactly, but in this context, it's not a voluntary diet choice, it's a metabolic crisis response. The byproduct of burning fat is ketones. Ketones are volatile chemicals. Acetone is literally a ketone. If you've ever used nail polish remover, you know that smell. When these build up in the blood, you breathe them out and you sweat them out. That creates that sickly sweet, fruity, or chemical odor.
So a patient could theoretically smell sour from the adrenaline sweat and sweet from the ketosis at the same time. That is a lot for one person to manage.
It is disorienting. And imagine the psychological toll. You feel terrible because your blood sugar is low and your adrenaline is spiking. And on top of that, you can smell this change on yourself. It creates this feedback loop of anxiety, which releases more adrenaline, which makes the odor worse.
I want to touch on the third mechanism the article brings up, which feels a bit more theoretical but makes sense: inflammation. We know cortisol is the body's ultimate anti-inflammatory. If that's gone, what happens to the waste products in the body?
This is the toxin theory, essentially. Without cortisol to dampen inflammation, people with AI often have low-grade systemic inflammation simmering in the background. The theory is that the sweat becomes a secondary route for excreting inflammatory byproducts. While this is harder to quantify than ketones, there is a consensus in endocrinology that metabolic waste products change the chemical composition of sweat. It can result in a bitter or sickly scent that doesn't smell like standard body odor.
It sounds like the body is just venting whatever it can because the normal filtration systems are overwhelmed. Now, looking at the history of this, adrenal insufficiency, specifically Addison's disease, was identified by Thomas Addison back in 1855. Did they notice smell back then?
It's interesting you ask that. In the 19th century, before we had blood tests, doctors relied heavily on the senses. They tasted urine to diagnose diabetes, and they smelled patients to diagnose organ failure. There are historical notes about the peculiar odors of various wasting diseases. While they didn't have the molecular understanding of catecholamines, they recognized that a failing body smells different than a healthy one.
We've sanitized medicine so much we've almost lost that diagnostic tool. We look at charts, not the patient. But there's one more specific factor for people with primary AI, or Addison's, right? The salt issue.
Yes, this is crucial for primary AI specifically. In primary AI, you aren't just missing cortisol. You're usually missing aldosterone too. Aldosterone is the hormone that tells your kidneys to hold on to sodium. Without it, you pee out all your salt.
Salt wasting.
Right. This creates a massive electrolyte imbalance. Low sodium, high potassium. This changes the pH and the salinity of your sweat. Your skin microbiome, that ecosystem of bacteria we talked about earlier, is very sensitive to pH. If you change the environment, you change which bacteria thrive. Different bacteria produce different gases when they eat, hence a different smell.
It's like changing the soil in a garden. You're going to get different weeds going. So we've established the why. It's adrenaline, ketosis, inflammation, and salt imbalance. But if I'm a patient listening to this and I'm nodding along thinking, yes, this is me, what do I actually do? The article has some management tips, but are they realistic?
They are practical, but they require consistency. The first one is diet, specifically regarding that sweet ketotic smell. The article suggests frequent, balanced meals to prevent hypoglycemia. If you stop the blood sugar crash, you stop the ketone production. That handles one major source of the odor.
So eating is literally part of the hygiene routine here.
Absolutely. Then there's the bacteria management. Using gentle antibacterial soaps or pH-balanced cleansers can keep the bacterial population on the skin in check. If there are fewer bacteria to break down that protein-rich adrenaline sweat, there's less odor. And they mention hydration, which is key for diluting the concentration of everything you're sweating out.
And clothing choice. They mention breathable fabrics.
Yeah, cotton or bamboo. The logic is simple. Get the moisture away from the skin fast. If the sweat sits there, the bacteria have a feast. If it evaporates, you cut off the food supply.
What strikes me about this article is how it empowers the patient to talk to their doctor. It actually gives specific scripts like saying, I believe this is catecholamine-driven apocrine sweat. That's a mouthful, but it sounds a lot better than I think I smell bad.
It frames the symptom medically. That is so important. If you go in and say, I have body odor, a busy doctor might dismiss it as anxiety or poor hygiene, but if you link it to the physiology, I suspect I'm having adrenaline surges because my cortisol coverage is too low. Now you're having a clinical discussion about dosage. You're speaking their language.
And the article references the Endocrine Society Clinical Practice Guidelines. That's a heavy hitter. It validates that these metabolic shifts, hypoglycemia, stress response, are documented symptoms of the disease.
Right, it's not just anecdotal. The Lancet and the Endocrine Society have extensively documented the metabolic chaos of adrenal insufficiency. While they might not have a paragraph specifically titled body odor, the mechanisms that cause the odor are undeniable facts of the condition.
Is there a danger signal here, though? At what point is the smell not just annoying, but a sign that you are in real trouble?
That is the critical takeaway. If the smell changes suddenly, becomes drastically foul, like rotting fruit or ammonia, that could signal a severe metabolic derangement like ketoacidosis, or an infection that your body can't fight off because of the immune suppression. In the world of AI, a sudden change in symptoms is always a reason to call the endocrinologist.
It's a warning system. Your body is sending up a flare.
Exactly. And I think there is a cultural aspect we need to acknowledge. We live in a society that is obsessed with sanitizing the body. We deodorize, we perfume, we scrub. For a patient with a chronic illness, finding out that their body is betraying that social contract can be incredibly isolating.
It adds shame to the suffering. You're already tired and dizzy, and now you're self-conscious about walking into a room.
But reframing it as data helps remove that shame. If you smell that sharp adrenaline scent, it's not because you're dirty. It's your body telling you, hey, I am running on fumes here. I need rest. I might need medication adjustment. I need support. It turns a source of embarrassment into a tool for management.
That's a powerful shift, from embarrassment to empowerment. It reminds me of how diabetics use continuous glucose monitors. This is almost like an olfactory monitor.
That's a great analogy. It's biofeedback. The challenge is just learning to interpret the signal without judging yourself for it.
We've covered the biology, the history, and the management, but I want to zoom out for a second. This article comes from My Adrenal Life, which is a patient advocacy space. Why do you think we see this kind of detailed symptom breakdown in blogs rather than in the pamphlet you get at the hospital?
That's the gap in modern medicine. Acute care handles the crisis. They keep you alive. They prescribe the steroids. But the lived experience, the day-to-day texture of the disease, like how you smell, how you sleep, how your skin feels, that often falls to the patient community to figure out. Resources like the National Adrenal Diseases Foundation and blogs like this fill the vacuum. They validate the things that aren't fatal but are life-altering.
It validates the reality that survival isn't the same as thriving. You can be medically stable according to your blood work, but if you smell like ammonia and are exhausted, are you really okay?
No, you're not. And often these subtle symptoms are the early warning signs that the stable blood work is about to change. Patients often know their bodies better than the labs do. If a patient says, I smell like I'm in ketosis, they are probably right, even if the blood sugar is just starting to dip.
Let's circle back to the why one last time. We talked about adrenaline and cortisol. Is there any evolutionary reason for this? Why would stress make us smell stronger? Is it a defense mechanism?
Evolutionary biologists would argue yes. In a primal context, if you are terrified, you are likely facing a predator or a threat. Releasing a strong, pungent odor might serve two purposes. One, it warns the rest of the pack that danger is near, chemical communication. Two, it might make you less appetizing to a predator. It's a survival mechanism that, unfortunately, doesn't translate well to a boardroom meeting in 2024.
So AI patients are essentially stuck in a primal survival loop.
Chemically, yes. Their bodies are reacting to the lack of cortisol as if it's a life or death emergency every day. The smell is just the exhaust fume of that engine revving too high.
That really drives home how serious this condition is. It's not just, I need to take a pill. It's, I need to manually regulate my entire stress response system. So, to wrap this up, if you are listening and you've noticed this symptom, the bottom line is, trust your nose.
Trust your nose and don't suffer in silence. Use the vocabulary from this article. Go to your endocrinologist and say, I'm worried about metabolic instability because of these odor changes. It's a valid medical concern. And check your hydration and salt intake. Sometimes the simplest fix can turn the volume down on the symptom.
And maybe give yourself a little grace. Your body is working incredibly hard to keep you going against the odds. That scent isn't a flaw, it's evidence of the effort.
Beautifully put. It's a fingerprint of survival.
We hope this deep dive cleared the air, pun intended, on a symptom that deserves more attention. If you know someone navigating the complexities of adrenal insufficiency, or even just someone fascinated by how our bodies work, pass this episode along. It might just be the validation they've been looking for.